And you gotta understand, we were just kids. We don't think as cognitively as scientists do, okay? Just a couple years ago, we still believed in Santa Claus. Except for me, my family didn't do Santa Claus. And now you want us to wonder if the ratio of a cylinder will affect its buoyancy? Like, come on. And also, we don't have access to any resources. You know, the science fair is a lot like an episode of Mythbusters. But what sets apart the Mythbusters from your average fourth grader is that they're really smart engineers who have access to explosives, while we can't even drive to Walmart ourselves. We have to ask our parents to take us. One year, I wanted to do an experiment on a certain type of soil, so I did research, I wrote everything all up, but then when I went to Home Depot to buy the soil, they didn't even have it. So I had to pick a new topic and start all over again. Now do you see why I think the science fair sucks? So okay, I think it would have been better in elementary school if we were assigned a question. I know the whole point of these things is about discovery, but we're all stupid, okay? I guess if you're anything like me and you chose a crappy question, you'll have a bad science fair. My very first science fair, after all day researching possible questions, me and my partner came up with a question: what time of the day is the hottest? Now, I already know the answer to this question, and in fourth grade, I'm sure I already knew the answer to this question too. It's noon. Like, I don't need to run an experiment on that. In fact, I can just go to Google and seriously just type weather, and boom, there's my data right there. No need for an experiment. But the science fair isn't just finding the answer to your question. No. First, after you research the topic, you have to write a hypothesis. A hypothesis is basically you guessing what you think the result of the experiment will be, but you don't write it down as I think this will happen. No, you write it like you know what's going to happen. A formula in science, for a perfect hypothesis is if blank, then blank because blank. Let's use my battery experiment. I said, does the temperature of a battery affect how long it will last? So after doing research about how batteries work, a hypothesis for this experiment would be if two AA batteries are used at different temperatures, then the battery in the hot temperature will not last as long because the battery's fluid will evaporate, which damages the internal structure of the battery. Oh, and spoiler alert, no, it doesn't. I put two batteries outside, two in the freezer, I let them sit, and then I plugged them into my Game Boy Advance, and they lasted the exact same amount of time. I learned nothing. So you also have to write up the materials you use for the experiment, then you have to write up the steps to do the experiment, the procedures, and you also have to write an introduction, basically just bullcrapping what you're going to do. Then you do the experiment, aka the fun part. Make sure you write down your results because you have to make a graph. You have to. How do you make a graph to show that batteries at different temperatures last the same amount of time? They did. You think you're done, right? But no, you gotta write up the results as if your graph didn't already perfectly depict that, and a conclusion. The conclusion is like the most insulting part of the science fair. You basically go through this checklist of questions that you answer. Was your hypothesis correct? No, my hypothesis was not correct. What mistakes could you have made in your experiment? I don't know. Maybe I took the batteries out of the cold and hot and put them in a room temperature Game Boy, and in a couple of minutes they both went to a room temperature. I don't know. How can others use this information you found? What do you mean? All the batteries lasted the same. I don't think anyone is going to put their batteries in their freezer to have literally no effect. Alright, and then you take everything you wrote, print it out, and then slap it onto a poster board. And everyone, and I mean everyone, would use construction paper as a border around the text to give the poster board a good aesthetic. I think the second most fun part of the science fair was choosing what word art font you would use for your title. Oh, and by the way, the teachers told us to have a creative title to catch people's attention. Like, that was part of the assignment. We got graded on the title. Basically, they were telling us to create puns for a grade. If you're doing a project that's measuring plant growth, Ready, Set, Grow, that was a very popular choice. And then everyone took their poster boards and presented it in front of the whole class. Those were the 3 most boring days of science ever, except for the day you presented. That was the most stressful day. And then after all of that, everyone in the school put their poster board up in the cafeteria, and then it was fun to walk around and see how other people decorated their poster board. And you could always tell whose mom helped them. So overall, I didn't have a good time. Those 21% of people who did enjoy it, I'm glad you liked it. But me and the other 21% of people think you're huge nerds. And when I asked that Twitter question, I had some people messaging me saying, yeah, I got 3rd place and all I had was a cup of dirt. Ha 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 ha. And that made me wonder, wait, it was a competition? So I think the key to science fair.
Alright, so what were you asking about Thursday?
One science fair, I did an experiment on rockets, and I had a blast. That would have been a good title. But for another year, I did what color light is the hottest. That's too much power for one person to have. So let me just give you some updates about the merch store, okay? I was originally just going to sell t-shirts, but then I contacted someone else and we got talking, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's more than t-shirts now. I'm just waiting for it to arrive in the mail so I can make a proper announcement video about it, but it's big. Sorry it took longer than expected. Hopefully it will be worth the wait. Also, Also, a big thanks to my UK friends who were nice enough to send me audio of them agreeing to everything. Speaking of science, hey guys, do you think the metric system is a stupid way of measuring things?
Yeah,
Yep, absolutely. Hey guys, do you think that you should wear your seatbelt?
yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Pencil.
Permanent marker for everything. Just a pen for everything else. I have Sharpie as gel pen. Sharpie as gel pen. The power of Sharpie. Now in a gel pen.
Did you clean off the gateway?
Yeah, I'm 25. That's a quarter of a century. And I've been doing YouTube full time for a nickel of a century. My life's practically over. I'm at a point now where when people recognize me, they'll say, OMG, James, I've been watching you since the 8th grade. And I'll be like, OMG, your beard is bigger than mine. So I've been thinking, you know those going through puberty videos your 8th grade science teacher shows you for some reason? The ones that are like, hey boys, I'm the puberty platypus, and I'm here to tell you that your body is going through some wonderful changes. You're gonna start growing hair in weird places, and smelling bad. But that's just the wonders of life. And then for the girl one, it's like, oh, ladies, you're gonna want to sit down for this one. Well, I think they need to make a puberty part 2 video that they show to high school seniors and prepare them better for the quote-unquote adult life they're about to face. Schools just give you a piece of paper and a funny hat and send you off into the world expecting you to figure out your intricate and complicated life? For what? Trial and error? I want the puberty part 2 video that I'm planning on making to start like this. The puberty platypus will come back on screen and will be like, well, kids, you did it. See? Puberty wasn't so bad. For some of you. Unfortunately, dear children, this is only the beginning. And then he'll start talking about all the fun things you can expect in the following years.
15.
This is the world's first ever actual pool of Jell-O. And while I'm making it simple, it's actually a very difficult engineering challenge to pull off. As proof, if you Google Jell-O pool, you will either find bad CGI or a handful of videos of people who tried to do this, but it really didn't work out. So today, we're going to answer possibly the longest standing question from my childhood: what would it be like to actually belly flop in a pool of Jell-O? But before we do that, I want to talk about what we actually have to go through for the past 6 months to pull this off. The idea of a Jell-O pool has been on my bucket list for over 4 years. In fact, when Kevin from the Backyard Scientists and I made the 25 million orbeez pool, our first idea was to do a pool of Jell-O. But it's really hard, because if you've ever made Jell-O, you might recall you first have to boil water, then mix in the powder, and then you have to refrigerate it for it to actually get firm. And that's easy enough to do for a small dish, but how do you boil and then refrigerate an entire pool? This seemed like a very worthy engineering challenge. So last year Thanksgiving, my brother and I came up with a plan, and then in the middle of winter, we started digging a hole in his backyard. And over the course of 2 months, we set up a bunch of small-scale experiments because we needed to answer questions like how much gelatin powder does it actually take to get to the ideal firmness, and how hot and then cold does the mixture actually need to get for the Jell-O chemical reaction to take place so it will actually get firm. From our experiments, we learned the Jell-O always got firm as long as the mixture got hotter than 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So we decided we could scale this up by using 6 55-gallon drums with a custom propane burner underneath and a spigot we welded to the side, but more on that later. So now we knew how we were going to heat it up, but how do you refrigerate an entire pool? For that, we teamed up with Mother Nature and just picked the perfect location and time of year. We installed a thermometer, and starting in January, we tracked the temperature in his backyard every night. We needed refrigerator temperatures at night, but not freezer temperatures, because that would freeze the Jell-O, and our experiment showed that totally ruins it. And so after looking at our data plus historical temperature plots, we really had about a 3-week sweet spot window towards the end of April to pull this off. Our goal was to have a Jell-O pool party in his backyard that would make even things and Kurt jealous. So the plan was to start 7 days before the party and fill the pool with an average of 10 barrels every day. That would give each layer a chance to get exposed to the cold night air and more efficiently get rid of the heat. And so with that, first thing Saturday, a full week before the party, we got to work.
place our barrels much higher than the pool, so when we were ready, we could use the potential energy to move the Jell-O from the barrels to the pool. We had to tackle about 1,000 other issues that came up that I won't bore you with, but day by day and layer by layer, the pool began to fill up. Because the Jell-O liquid was so much heat energy we needed to remove before it could get firm, in addition to using the cold night air, my brother's neighbor Nick happened to have a spare swamp cooler in his shop, so we kept that running over the top of the pool pretty much the whole year. This gave us convection cooling. It's the equivalent of rolling down a car window for the pool, or like when you blow on the top of a hot tub soup. This constantly replaces the boundary layer of air right at the surface with fresh, cold air that will suck out the heat more efficiently. And so, as we put in the final batch Friday night, with ominous weather threatening to ruin the whole effort, at this point, we had done all we could. We were exhausted after a week, and I wasn't feeling super confident because my specialty is more mechanical things, and this project was more about chemistry and thermodynamics. And I didn't want that lame jelly box stuff people try and pass off as Jell-O. And so even if it didn't last long in the sun, I wanted to at least have the experience of seeing even a single belly flop on a smooth pool of actual Jell-O. If this was going to be a total failure, it wouldn't be from lack of effort. And so we woke up Saturday morning with a forecast for a warm, sunny day, and we pulled off the tarp to find a pool filled with actual freaking Jell-O. By this point, word in the neighborhood had definitely spread around as to what we were up to, and my brother asked if some of their friends' kids could have first dibs. And so with that, I'm happy to report this is what it looks like to belly flop in a pool of Jell-O. effect of undoing some of the solidness of the lower layers.
When you go in, you'll feel your nose and like ears. It's a very cerebral feeling of just being like, it's kind of hard to move, but it's just slimy and slippery. It actually feels really cool. We have some cool toys in the booth.
The story behind a story, where we look at a story that I wrote and go behind that story, but I can't tell you what the story is without wrecking the ending. So what you got to do is join Matt and I for an unscripted conversation Saturdays at 9 p.m. later on PBS. We reflected on the path that has brought it here. We have no choice but to air this mess. I'm sorry, Lee, but this is 30 minutes of very disappointing television. Lee,
about summer? Paramount Plus's streaming summer special. That's what. Get all of this for just this. You're welcome. I had 100 cockroaches here, and I placed them in this James Bond-style contraption that turns this ball screw and forces them out after a specified time delay. Then I put in the lunchbox for camouflage, and then I release them in this office. And you might think, that's not very nice, Mark. Some people are afraid of cockroaches. Trust me, I know. And that's exactly the point, because this isn't just any office. This is ground zero for one of those terrible call centers that scams people of their life savings. A year ago when I released this video about inadvertently stumbling onto the low-level thugs in this international scam operation, I said we were going to glitterball our way all the way to the top, even if it meant taking the spike to the other side of the globe. And so after a year and a half of planning, we infiltrated not one, not two, not three, but 4 different scam call centers. We released cockroaches, smoke bombs, stink bombs, glitter bombs, and then of course we hacked their CCTV so we could watch the whole thing unfold in real time. So buckle up, because this is the wild conclusion to this multinational adventure, and please watch to the end because there's something you can actually do to help put the nail in the coffin of these 4 massive call centers. Now, why would we go after this $20 billion scam industry? Well, we're doing it for the 60 million people who've lost money to scammers in the past year. But more specifically, we're doing it for Bessie, who you might recall from my previous video when I detailed exactly how one of these scams work.
You're like my nanny with Bessie,
Yeah.
She was like one of my closest. I used to share each and everything with her.
Basically, it starts with an email or a spam call, then they pretend to be Amazon or Microsoft, and they tell the victim they've been charged $200 for something, but if you call back, you can dispute the charge. Then after they call, they eventually get on the victim's computer and importantly have the victim type the $200 refund amount into a bogus form.
Please enter your refund account.
Only they take over and secretly type the amount of $20,000 and then they hit enter real quick.
Check everything. Is it correct?
Oh, no, this is a mistake. Oh, I screwed up. It was supposed to be a 200 in there. Oh, God almighty. I'm exhausted. I can't do this. My mind is absolutely fried.
Check your account. Did you see that money in your account?
Then they take her to a totally fake, spoofed bank account page where it looks like because of Bessie's mistake, they just sent her $20,000 instead of $200.
Oh my God. Plus 20,000.
Yeah.
Please save my job now. If I'm not earned for my family will die due to hunger, due to starvation.
Yes, of course. I mean, what should I do? I mean, I can,
You are also like my grandmother.
you know, I'm an honest person.
I'm getting attached.
And how do I fix this?
And now you can see how he's weaponized her empathy. Now to fix her mistake, how she's willing to go to the bank and withdraw what she thinks is an extra $20,000 in cash, when in reality, it's $20,000 of her hard-earned savings, and she's gonna send it in the mail to a harmless scammer. Now, in case you think that got a lot nicer over the last year, here's another call from a few weeks ago where the scam is to pretend they're from the government and there's some missing taxes they're owed.
I just retired, as you say, last February, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer in August. So my retirement hasn't been very good so far. And after today, I know it's not your fault, but it works out.
So, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Otherwise, I'll be worrying about this, and I'll be worse in my health, you know what I mean? Or even if I have to pay it in 2 halves.
So the scammer places her on hold to talk with the authorities to see if there's just something that can be done to help her out.
Thank you so much for holding the line, ma'am. I just had a word with the higher authorities, and I informed them about your situation, and they are also concerned about your health.
So concerned, in fact, she'll only have to send these scammers $2,000.
The actual amount found out missing in the taxes was $1,489.
Now, last year's operation was effective in getting a handful of people involved in the scam not only covered in glitter, but also arrested. But the problem was, we discovered these were just the low-level mules and supervisors who would then send the bulk of the money back to the actual scammers in India. And while we did turn over all the intel we gathered to the 5 major government agencies that reached out to us, and truly there's Bessie, our goal is to take our glitter all the way to the top and either temporarily disrupt or possibly even permanently shut down a few of these terrible call centers. It'd be like a special operation, and every special operation needs a special ops team, a target, and a plan. For the team, I turn back to my good friend Jim Browning, who you recall from last year has a YouTube channel that specializes in reversing the connection to the scammers' computers and gaining access to their CCTV footage.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I want to know why you scam people.
And then another YouTube channel called Trilogy Media would be the boots on the ground in India implementing the pranks, but more on them later. For the target, together we were able to locate and gather tons of incriminating information on 4 different scam call centers. For starters, there's Met Technologies located in Kolkata, India on the 5th floor of this building. They've been in operation over 12 years and they've got over 1,000 agents. Their owner is Mr. Kunal Gupta, and you can even see the rest of their leadership team here on their public website. And you might ask, well, why would a scam call center have a public website? And the answer is they all do, because they have a very small percentage of their employees do legitimate call center work. So if they get raided by the authorities, they can point to that small group and say their hands are clean, while the real money-making operation runs here behind a secure door. Then we found VRM, also located in Kolkata on the 12th floor of this building. They also have over 1,000 agents, and they've been in operation for 6 years, and they run 24 hours a day in 3 shifts to target people in time zones all across the globe. Oh, and allow me to introduce to the world Rajesh and Vidya Goenka, the husband and wife co-owners. Next was Anj Info Solutions on the 5th floor of this building. They also run 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, and they've been up and running for 11 years with all their key info shown here. They're located just a block away from VRM. In fact, all 3 of these centers were located within just a few miles of each other here in Kolkata, India, which is a hot spot for scam call centers like this. And finally, there was one more relocated, but we're not releasing public information on them yet, and you'll see why in just a little bit. And so once we'd amassed mountains of evidence against all 4 of them, thanks to Jim's handiwork, we hired 10 private investigator types to apply for jobs at each of these centers, and after a few weeks, we had them all in place. Now, in order for them not to arouse suspicion, they had to legitimately scam some people, but we told them to remember the victim's information, and then we would reach out and double any money that was lost. And at first, one of our agents in the VRM call center went against protocol and used his phone to capture some footage for us of the bathrooms and the server rack and whatever this is, but they must have seen him filming with his phone on their CCTV, because the next day, some of the security team showed up at his house. Now luckily, his roommate knew to lie and say he wasn't home, and he was able to escape through the back alley, but they stayed out in front of his house all day and later sent this message saying the director wanted to speak with him and they would pay him handsomely, and of course, he didn't need to be scared. They were just simply curious what kind of evidence he'd gathered against them already. So from that point on, we reiterated to the remaining 9 to lay really low like a sleeper cell until we were ready to activate the plan. And speaking of the plan, now that we saw what we were up against, we knew we'd have to go full James Bond Q mode with some high-tech gadgetry that could make it past security.
All skin goes are sensitive. Sensitive isn't a skin type. It's a skin state. Dry skin, hormonal skin, sunburned, razor burn, red.
Which is why this first prank is just a water bottle. Kind of. I mean, it can function as a normal water bottle, but if you unscrew just this portion of the lid, it reveals a trough. And if you put military-grade putrid-smelling stuff in that trough, and then screw the lid back on fully, it creates a perfect seal and you can't smell anything. But then at the exact precise moment you want to release a cloud of death, you just twist the lid like this, allowing the smell to escape through these holes and fill the room. And we're using a water bottle because from looking at the CCTV footage, we know they allow them to have water bottles at their desks, so they'll be able to sneak them past security. Plus, no one's going to suspect that's the origin of the smell. Next up, if you take some hand soap and add just a few drops of the same kitchen-grade food coloring we used on the Devil's toothpaste explosion, then when you wash your hands, it will leave them stained for at least a day. We'll leave this in the bathroom, and as a bonus, we'll learn exactly who does and doesn't wash their hands. This next one is the most simple, but also perhaps the most effective. You take a box of Sudafed and then print out and paste on some of these labels and convert it to a box of Viagra. Then importantly, you add the name of the boss of the scam call center to the box, like it's his prescription. And then you leave it in the bathroom next to your Rousseau. Next up is that custom-built box that can store cockroaches in. So after a predetermined time delay, the microcontroller will trigger the stepper motor, which causes the wall to slide along this ball screw. That means if you disguise it in your lunchbox, then nothing happens until the timer expires. And then suddenly, you get a bunch of cockroaches crawling out of a lunchbox. Although you can put more than just cockroaches in here, and some other ideas we had were bees, because we heard India has some species that don't actually sting, as well as possibly rats, because we already knew from looking at their security footage that once released, the rats can make themselves right at home. And using a lunchbox for camouflage is once again a strategic choice, because we already knew from our recon work, they always make it past security because no one actually checked what's inside. Next up, I love the idea of the chaos that could result if we set off a smoke bomb, but we were concerned that it might be crossing the lines if the room was too small, because like the glitter bombs, I want everything I do to be exciting. Relatively.
OMG, you two are adorable!
We also used loads of equipment to latch onto the floor and pass security. So the plan was to put it inside a helmet like this, and then it would also detonate itself based on a timer. And finally, as the pièce de résistance, we're going to deliver them a package. Only this isn't an ordinary package. It's Glitter Bomb 4.0, which of course, as we all know, is equipped with a pound of the world's finest glitter and an uncharitable amount of fart spray. And so now that our team, target, and plan were in place, after 1.5 years of prep work, it was time to avenge Bessie and execute the special operation. Step 1 was getting the Trilogy India guys all the way over to India, contraptions stored securely in their luggage.
Oh my God, stepping foot on Indian soil.
Now safely on the ground, step 2 was to go pick up those stingless bees that we could put in the lunchbox. But once they'd arrived to the beekeeper, they found out you can't just take a few bees, but you have to take the whole hive.
In the car, dude, no. They're gonna get out.
Also, apparently, there's no such thing as stingless bees.
Oh my God. Oh!
So we punted on that idea and headed to an open-air market where we could at least secure some rats. By the way, the Trilogy Media YouTube channel is composed of Ashton, who's a former magician, and Art, who played professional basketball in Russia for 8 years. They're just an incredible duo. And speaking of incredible things, this is a good time to point out that the real people of India were just so freaking lovely. It's true that nearly every scam call you get originates from that country, but everyone in India hates these scammers too. They are a tiny, tiny fraction of the total population, and no one wants to be defined by the worst in their midst. Most people we interacted with there had hearts more like Johnny, who's an honorary member of the team and a reformed scammer who's made it his life's mission to do whatever he can to take these guys down, even if that means working some back channels to get our hands on 100 cockroaches.
Alright, let's go.
So the goods procured, it was time to meet up with our sleeper agents in the hotel to do some final prep on the contraptions, which went about as well as expected.
Seriously though, open the assistant right here, right here.
Yeah.
Can't go in the bathroom.
16, 17.
Yeah, no, get it home, then one merge.
I see.
Okay. Stop.
All sailors can communicate with each other. And because Johnny was still a member of this group from his former days, he saw this message pop up. 2 of us in the town of Kolkata have seen cuss word Trilogy people. We followed them, but the driver drove the car very fast to the Salt Lake side. There was 2 Indians with them, and they were shooting a movie. So apparently some scammers had recognized Art and Ashton at the market as the Trilogy Media YouTube guys, because they've confronted a lot of scammers in their 5 years of making videos. Now thankfully, just out of habit, Johnny was driving in a way that would make it hard for anyone to tail them. But they still were able to pinpoint their hotel location within about a half a mile. But then it got much worse. Might be they are working with the FBI, so I request all of our brothers to have an eye in Salt Lake. So whenever you see them, you shoot them. Which was super devastating, because it seemed pretty clear to me that we'd have to scrap the whole operation, because while the mission was important, it definitely wasn't worth anyone getting hurt. But when I brought this up to the guys, they'd already discussed it amongst themselves and decided this was a cause they were passionate about, that they were willing to accept some risks. So we decided moving forward, Art and Ashton wouldn't step a foot outside their hotel room, and that's when the second major blow came. Because apparently the group text warning spooked the call scam center so much, they just changed up everyone's assignments, and they were planning on moving all 3 of our sleeper agents to a new floor where there was no CCTV coverage. But this is where we had a stroke of luck, because at the last minute, Johnny thought to have another one of his reformed scammer friends apply for a job. And because he had so much experience on his resume, they hired him on the spot and gave him a more highly trusted role, which meant he could be the one to smuggle in all our gadgets. And so with that, he loaded up, headed in for battle, and an hour later, we had a man on the inside. And by the way, now that we're inside, I'll give you a very quick crash course on what we've learned about how these scam centers operate after watching them for so long. First of all, 90% of the victims are 65 years old or above.
I don't understand that. I don't understand all of this.
They really only make calls during the U.S. working day hours and not on the weekends, because that maximizes their chance the person who picks up will be retired. This is why you never get scam calls on Sunday. They don't have anyone even working the phones. In fact, many of them have an auto-dial prompt that says press 1 if you're over 65 years old, and if you press anything else, it just hangs up. The most common scam is the Amazon refund scam, but they also pretend to be Microsoft, McAfee, Norton Antivirus, the IRS, and your bank, and on and on. It's always changing, but it's also always something you've heard of to try and build trust right out of the gate. If you want to know how much they make, well, that information, unfortunately, is securely held on the boss's computer, so we can't get to it.
It's so easy to get your windshield replaced with a safe light. Some people I have done it already. Started off with a chip and grew to a crack and just keeps going. So what do we do now? I went ahead and scheduled an appointment online at safelight.com and the news here.
Let's get started.
This looks incredible. Oh, safe light repair.
Safe light replay.
Before I begin, I'd like to say that this video is extremely embarrassing. I'm going to tell you some things that some of my closest friends don't know about me. So if you know me in real life, or if you're like my future boss or grandchild watching this, then please, alright. Things that I do that adults probably don't do. I close my closet door before I go to sleep every night. Okay, so this one's not super embarrassing, but why do I do it? I know monsters aren't real. Sometimes I'll already be in my bed, open my eyes, tiny bit, and see the black void of my closet, and then I have to get up and close it. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't know why. It's not like there's a monster in my closet that's been waiting for like 18 years for the one night I forget to close my door. I just don't like it. Also, I'm terrified of crossing. I will always walk across the street while checking both directions every 2 seconds. I think part of the reason why I'm afraid is because when I was little, my mom told me the way cars are made, drivers can't see little kids at all. Which is what I call bullcrap on that mom, unless you're driving like monster trucks. So whenever I would cross the street and see a car in the distance, I would have to run as fast as I possibly could. I didn't want to die. I guess that fear stayed with me as I grew up. And I remember in high school, some kids would walk across the street without looking both ways. Not even a glance. They were just like, good, yeah. If you're already going 50, instead of both. So if me and you are ever walking together, and suddenly I start speed walking, you'll know why. I watch Minecraft videos, and I don't even play Minecraft anymore. What happened was that I started watching them while I drew comics. If I didn't feel like listening to music or Netflix didn't have any good movies to watch, I would watch the Minecraft videos, specifically Captain Sparkle. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He's a pretty small YouTube channel. And I started watching more and more, and I kind of got attached to the point where if I had no idea what
Bronson, did you get enough beef for dinner?
Mm-hmm.
No, lady. Bronson is going to feed you like he said he would as soon as he got home. Aren't you, bud? Aren't you, bud? You get the trash out? Man, slacking on your jobs today. What are you playing? What are you playing?
Yeah.